Hello and welcome to History Behind the Page, the live series where you get to know more about the people behind your favorite history pages. I always butcher that opening. Anyways, tonight is going to be a fun night. We have Seth from SNAFU Podcast on tonight. He is an 8th Air Force Instagram page and podcast, so I'm super excited to have him on. This is also a live Q&A, so you are more than welcome to ask questions. I do ask that on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there is a little question mark bubble. Please submit your questions there, as sometimes they do get lost in the comments, and we want to make sure that we're answering all of the questions. So we will get Seth on here in just a second, but I'm going to take off this bracelet first because it is jangling and driving me insane. So, all right. Let's get him on here. Let's see. SNAFU. It takes just a second. All right, let's see if that worked. This is the fun part. Glitchy IG. It'll be just a second, guys. I hope everybody's having a good day. Nice weather out here today, so SNAFU Pod is unable to join. Let's see. All right, give us just a second. Hey, Seth, if you're watching, can you send a request for me? You'll hit the little camera button that's on the bottom left-hand corner. I don't know why it's not working. Oh!
Hey, sorry about
There we
that.
go. It's okay.
Having technical difficulties today.
It's all good. Yay, it worked.
Yeah.
How are you?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's Friday Eve, so that's even better. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that means
Yeah. So how was the weather out there? Because you live in the Pacific Northwest, correct?
Yeah, I live in Oregon. It's 80 today and sunny, so which is actually pretty good. So yeah.
Well, weather-wise, it's the same as it is in Western PA where I live. Where like you don't get too many of these days, so you try to enjoy them.
Yeah. Usually it's overcast and rainy here, but we've been having really good weather lately. So
yeah, same here.
All right. Well, let's get this show on the road. But also, again, really quickly, I want to remind everybody that this is a live Q&A, so you are more than welcome to ask questions. There is a question mark bubble on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can submit your questions there, as they do get lost in the comments, and we want to make sure that we want to get questions answered. So Seth, let's see. Why don't we start off with what got you into history?
Oh, well, I guess it's kind of like ingrained in my family's blood. Like, my father is a veteran of the so he's like an avid lover of like history and military history. Both sets of grandparents or grandfathers served in the Vietnam and Cold War, so both of them are history nerds. So I mean, and then I have cousins who graduated from West Point, so they're all history nerds as well. It's just, and like all the men in my family all have this like fascination with history. But specifically, it was my grandfather on my mom's side, who was like a real avid World War II fanatic. And every time we'd go over to his house, as you know, growing up, pretty much any World War II movie that was made between like 45 to maybe early 80s, it was always on like TV. So
Yeah.
I grew up watching movies like Midway, The Longest Day, The Last Airbender. I mean, these were like my bread and butter growing up. So it was only a matter of time before my brain was like, well, you know, you're watching this instead of cartoons, so we might as well just enjoy this. So
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So, SNAFU Podcast.
Yeah.
So how did this whole thing begin?
Okay. So, long story. So really, I guess, okay. It started when I was about 5 years old. I don't remember or know the circumstances behind it, but I watched the movie Memphis Belle.
I love that movie.
It's such a good
Such a good.
And I don't know what it was about that movie, but it attached itself to my 5-year-old brain, and it's never left. And the obsession with the 8th Air Force, the B-17 specifically, and then also the Memphis Belle, the actual story, it's only grown as I've gotten older. So when I was in my first year of college, I was going to school for English and psychology, and I wanted to be a better writer. So what I decided to do was I was going to write something that I could kind of use to exercise what I was learning in school. So like if I was in English class during the day, I would get to utilize and actually execute what I was learning on whatever piece of writing I was doing. And so I didn't know what to write. And there's the old saying, writers write what they know. Well, I'm like, well, I don't know what I know. And the only thing that I felt like I knew enough about to write about was B-17s and the 8th Air Force. So I started writing this story that I thought was like a work of genius. And but I in the course of me writing this, I met a guy at this little coffee shop I was working at. I don't know if you've heard of it, called Dunkin' Donuts.
Yes. They don't have those. They don't have those out here, and I so wish they did. I've never had a Dunkin' Donuts coffee.
Yeah, they're on every corner here.
Yeah.
There was this older gentleman that would come in with all of his buddies at like 4:30 in the morning, and of course I was the 4:30 in the morning shift. And when you're up that early, like, you're just waiting for the day to start. So I would like chit chat with some of these guys, and the one guy, his name was Alex Ganyu. He was talking about his experiences in World War II, and I found out that he was a pilot of a B-17 in the 96th Bombardment Group, which is in the 8th Air Force, and served in the early months of 1944, which was the time period that my story takes place. And not to mention, he also retired as the English teacher. So I was like, if there's ever a guy that's going to be my guiding light, it's this guy.
Oh my gosh.
I struck up a conversation with him, kind of mentioned that I was writing a story, but I didn't want to be like, hey, I'm a history nerd who wants to write this book, whatever. And like finally, after like, I would say a month or so of like getting to know him, I finally mustered up the courage to ask him if he would read what I had written so far, both as a veteran and also as an English teacher. And of course he agreed, and then ever so graciously gave it back to me a month later. And in a very gentle and caring way that only Alex could really pull off, he essentially told me that he's like, first of all, your spelling is horrible. Your grammar is horrible. Definitely don't work with that. He said, but as far as your story goes, it is not factual or accurate at all. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And he, like, again, like, I don't want to paint him out to being like he was super critical, but his critiques, and I don't exactly remember the word, like the exact wording he used. So this is just almost 7, 8 years of memory that I'm going to try to paraphrase. But he essentially said that what I had gotten wrong was just like, there's a lot of like smaller like pieces of like how the B-17 operated. Of course, like there was a lot of military facts that he's like, yeah, no, that's how they do it today. It's not how they did it back then. But his main criticism is he said the tone of the story was completely off. And, you clearly are, he said, a young lad who has a love and fascination for World War II, and especially with the 8th Air Force. He said, and that comes out clearly in what you've written. You write with a lot of glory and a lot of, like, you writing this like you're talking about heroes. He said, however, you have to understand that we were just doing a job. He was like doing what we had to do. It was like going up on a mission to us was the same as you getting ready for work and driving to work and going about. And he was like, there was nothing glorious about what we did. And then he also really, over the course of a couple months in conversation with them, really opened up about the actual like horrible things that he witnessed in combat. So with that in mind, and then he was the one who actually turned me on to reading Masters of the Air by Donald Miller. And was like, this book captures exactly what it was like. And this is long before I realized that Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks were going to do a TV show based off of that.
Yeah.
So I read that, and then from there, I kind of like started from scratch and rewrote what became what has since become season 1 of SNAFU. And so I was gonna like put together this story kind of with the hopes of publishing it as a book. And then in 2019, I was working for the company I work for now, and I was working as a medical driver. So I had all this time in the world to listen to audiobooks and podcasts. And I don't know, there was just something about like true crime podcasts that it was like the perfect mix of like dramatization, while also like giving you a really cool narrative. It was like an audiobook. And I remember just thinking like, man, I really wish there was something like this about history, like not necessarily an audiobook, but like a dramatized, like story. And I don't know, there was something that clicked in my head, and I was like, well, Seth, you idiot, you are literally sitting on this book that, let's be honest, you're never going to get the guts or the money together to actually publish it. It's going to be one of these things that your grandkids are going to discover in a locked chest up in the attic. They're going to be like, oh, why didn't you ever publish this? So I was like, why don't I just use this and just do my own podcast and just see what happens? And it took 2 years of fighting every possible excuse of why it couldn't be done. And finally, and during, I would say, the end of 2020, I was like, well, listen, I might as well just do it. Even if it sucks at first, I might as well just do it, because I'm never gonna do it if I don't just jump in and do it. So that's how that came about. That's the long story of that.
Well, it's a good story, but do you know what? You never know if your book is gonna get published or not. Never say never. So you have good stuff. So I think it's great. So you started SNAFU Podcast. You started SNAFU Podcast in 2020?
Or 2020, or I started the
2021
process of converting it from a book to a podcast in December of 2020. I started actually recording, I want to say it was in February of 2021.
So describe for everybody what they expect when they listen to your episodes.
Well, it's like I said, it's like think of an audiobook, but with like really cool sound effects. So it tells the story of a bomber crew from the time that they pretty much land in England, and it is telling their journey, their path, of them trying to make it through their 25 mission tour. And you not only do you get a sense for what airmen really went through, as far as the struggles with combat, the struggles with like PTSD, and all those things that Alex, my veteran friend, kind of did to me. But you also get a lot of, I think, practical elements that we can apply to life. Things like there's a lot of leadership lessons in there. A lot about like, how do you have hope in a hopeless situation? How do you motivate yourself and others to do something that you may never get credit for doing, or people may never see it as like you did something miraculous. So like there's a lot of, I think, non-history elements to the story, as well as giving a lot of, as close as accurate as I possibly can. That's something that I really did in honor of Alex, was try to keep it as authentic and accurate as possible. So
your podcast reminds me of back in the 1940s when you would listen to plays, and before television, you would listen to everything on the radio. And so that's what your podcast reminds me of. And I think it's so great. It's not just like an audiobook or like storytelling. You're kind of doing it in a format back from, the 30s and the 40s. And that's how people, gather around the radio at 7 o'clock for their favorite show and all that stuff. So,
I mean, isn't that kind of hilarious how things come and go? Like a thing will be outdated, and then it seems to get like dusty on a shelf, and then a couple years or maybe a generation or two will go by, and then they'll discover it on the shelf. They'll like dust it off, like away to the garbage bin, and they'll be like, wow, like this is actually really cool. And then it becomes popular again, So
I think that's great. So besides the 8th Air Force, do you have any other interests in World War II or stuff that you find yourself going on rabbit holes about? Because all of us history nerds know rabbit holes way too well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. My other interest is specifically like the Battle of Midway, but like the War in the Pacific is another huge interest of mine. I would say the Battle of Midway is the closest I have is to having like an obsession about, like, I have an obsession with the 8th Air Force, and I would say I have an obsession with the Battle of Midway too, because it's just like it's like an endless pit. Like the more you dig up, the more you find, and there's just so many elements of that battle, and that, I mean, it's just, no matter what perspective you look at it, from the American or the Japanese side, it's just, there's just so much to unpack, so much to uncover. And the stories that happened during that battle, like, it talk about seeing the greatest acts of mankind. I mean, if you read about what Dick Best did, the fact that he successfully hit two aircraft carriers in one day, and then never flies again. Like, that story alone, just his story could be made into a movie, let alone the whole battle itself, which has been. But so I would say that's my second. And then also, I'm also a huge fan and history nerd for anything to do with Band of Brothers.
Get in line, Seth. Get in line.
I actually, believe it or not, I remember, it's a fond memory I have. I remember watching it like as it was coming out on HBO. I mean, I was young, and again, it was just so amazing. And then it's like, the more times I watch it, the more I pick up on it. And then I also have back in I guess I should start off by saying a little fun fact about me is I was born in Germany. And oddly enough, I was born what at the time was the American military hospital. And I found out recently that hospital building, which is now, I think it's the American Consulate building, it was originally built to be a hospital specifically for members of the German Luftwaffe. So there's like a long history there. But anyways, all right, I digress. So I went back to Germany to see like where I was born and all that. While I was there, my mom, who is a Google queen, I swear, like she invented Google specifically for her, because she has this really amazing ability. Anywhere, any vacation we ever took, she always like found the coolest things for us to do. While we were in Germany, she got us in touch with the tour guide who took Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks on the tour of like Bastogne when they were coming up with, you know, how to make Band of Brothers. So we got together with him. He had all of his credentials. It was insane. We went to Bastogne. We got to stand in Dick Winters' foxhole, which is amazing. We got to go to the town of Foy. Got to do all that, and then we've been to. We went to the Eagle's Nest, and we went to where Hitler's house used to be. So like all those. So I've kind of like accidentally done the whole Band of Brothers tour thing. All I have to do left is Normandy, and I guess you could count England. I guess Toccoa Falls too. Okay, so there's a lot left to do on my list. I'm just not realizing. Yeah. But yeah, so that's it. So that's my other rabbit holes and interests.
Is Band of Brothers and Midway. Yeah, a lot of people. So I have really enjoyed the movie Midway, and we have to remember that when we see war movies, they're making a movie, they're not making a documentary. We got to sometimes take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
But a lot of people, when history nerds who talked about Midway, the kind of what you were saying, where they could make a whole movie about Dick Best by itself. They're like, they didn't tell the full story of him. They, there was so much going on, and they wanted to fit so much in one movie. I really enjoyed the movie. I went and saw it in the Wave uniform that I have in my profile picture.
Oh, that's cool.
We all dressed up in World War II Navy uniforms and went and saw Midway when it came out. Yeah, it was super history nerd.
That's cool. That's cool. I liked it too. I really wish though, and I want to see if you agree or disagree with this. I think it would have been 10 times better if they would have made it into like a 5-part miniseries.
Yeah, because there's so much to the Battle of Midway. And especially with how many bigwigs were involved in it. You only got to see tiny little, Doolittle was barely in it. Was it Aaron Eckhart who played Doolittle? And there's so much more. But that would have been cool to do like a 5-part miniseries, an hour each, and take a note from the Band of Brothers in Pacific.
Right. Well, I think I believe, and I think this is a good thing overall. I think that like that style of movie making where you have these big blockbuster like war epics, I think that's actually starting to go away. I think in the future, all like future filmmaking endeavors like that are going to be made into miniseries or TV shows. So I feel like I just feel like television in general is moving more towards like a miniseries or television show than what used to be just done in movies. I don't know.
And I think that has a lot to do with because everything's streaming now. Everybody likes to binge things. We get everything on our television. And then once COVID hit and everything shut down, they just started filming stuff directly to streaming. So even movies that came out during COVID, you didn't go to the movie theater, you streamed it from your television.
Right.
So, I mean, because I know nowadays that I find myself watching more series than I do movies. Because you're looking forward to the next episode and what's going to happen next. It's not it hasn't ended yet, unlike a 2.5-hour movie. So I can see that happening. And with Hulu and Netflix, they're all doing their own personal shows too now, and it's insane.
Well, that, and it's also kind of funny too, because like I'm the same way. I've been watching a lot more TV shows than movies recently, and I just went back and watched the Lord of the Rings movies, and it felt like super rushed. And I'm like, okay, I know this is like, these are all super long movies. Why do I? And it's because I'm so used to in television shows, they really like flesh out characters and storylines, and everything seems to have like room to grow and to marinate. Whereas in a movie format like that, everything just seems so compact and rushed.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's weird just how much, like, I don't know, your viewing opinions change because of things like that. So
yeah, it's super, super crazy. So you've done the whole Band of Brothers, well, most of the Band of Brothers tours.
Most.
So let's take Band of Brothers out of it.
Okay.
If you could go anywhere to travel in the world, like what historical sites do you want to go to? What is a place that you just want to go to and see and visit and experience the history? But if it is the Band of Brothers thing, that's totally fine. I was just seeing if there was. I like to ask tough questions.
Oh, that's really, really tough because, I mean, I could say Pearl Harbor, clearly. I would even love to go to the island of Midway. I know there's not much out there, but still to be pretty cool. Plus, I'm just from photos, like they still have like the aircraft hangars still up and standing, so that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna again, there's just so many places I can think of. Would love to go to the island of Iwo Jima. But I'm gonna have to say, I would love to take I would love to go to England and take a tour of the different 8th Air Force and Bomber Command airfields. Like just do like a tour, like get like a like an RV and just like go around all of East Anglia and just check those out. I think that would be so cool.
No, that would be super cool. So besides Memphis Belle, are there any other Air Force movies that are on the top of your list? I mean, there's not that many, but
I mean, there's 12 O'Clock High.
Yes, thank you.
Listen, okay, like, can we just talk about how much of a masterpiece that movie is?
It's so good.
Like, even by today's standards, first of all, the cinematography for 1949, it's pretty stellar.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like, Gregory Peck, his acting is impeccable, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But so 12 O'Clock High, both the movie and the TV show, phenomenal. In fact, if there's any fans of the television show, no, it's hard to find. If you go to the SNAFU Pod website, snafupod.net, there's a link. If you go to information and links, there's a link to watch the show free on YouTube. It's almost impossible to find if you just go to YouTube, but I have it all set up in like a playlist. So if you go there, you can watch the television show. It's worth watching. Fantastic. But as far as 8th Air Force, sadly, there really isn't a lot out there. And I think a lot of that comes down to people just really don't realize like what the air war entailed. Because when people think of air war, they think of the P-51 Mustang, they think of like fighter pilots, but there's not a lot of glory that gets shared about the bomber crews. And they had not only did they have a really rough job, but if you look at, I mean, okay, like I'll put it this way. When I was trying to come up with the title for this podcast, the military acronym SNAFU, which stands for Situation Normal, All Fucked Up, that was the most, like, in my opinion, that is the clearest definition of what the 8th Air Force, what their job was. I think that's, sadly, it's not something that gets shown a lot in the media. So Memphis Belle would be probably, like, as far as movies go, like the top tier. 12 O'Clock High is pretty darn good. There's also some amazing documentaries though about the 8th Air Force, like amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people. It's when you ask, kids who are used to modern movies nowadays. But whenever you say 12 O'Clock High, everyone's like, that movie drug on. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. That thing was so entertaining.
Oh, it's so good.
And
so good.
During that era of a lot of war movies came out because a lot of the actors were veterans, but also the war had just ended. So you had all these, recent events that just happened, and you had actors and people who worked on the film set who were actual veterans of,
Oh yeah.
of World War II being like, that's not how it was done. That's not how it was done. This is, type of
Yeah.
thing. So,
Yeah.
which sadly Hollywood is still like that nowadays, which is why you have like military advisors and tech advisors and stuff like that. But,
yeah. And then, that, like, the funny thing about that is, like, sometimes you watch, and I'm not like I'm like, my dad, having served in the military, he's very critical of like military movies. As I think almost anyone who's fought in the army or the military is, but there's a lot of war movies or military movies that I'm like, what did the technical advisor do?
Yeah.
Like, was he there for one day and he was like, all right, guys, I'm going to take off. Let me know when it's done. I mean, so, like, going back to 12 O'Clock High, the other thing, like, I always tell people it's worth watching is it was really a first of its kind in the fact that it was one of the first movies that dove into the psychological effects of war.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was the whole reason why Gregory Peck agreed to do it, because he was anti-war and he thought this was a really good depiction of what war does to the human psyche.
Mm-hmm.
But you think about the movie was made in 1949. I mean, you don't start seeing movies like that until maybe the late 70s.
Yeah.
With so like I can't give that movie enough praise. It's so good. But
yeah,
those people who say it drags on, wait until they get to like closer to 30, age 40. They'll go back and they'll be like, this movie's so good.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you just have to be in the right mindset for it.
Yeah. Well, what I loved about movies back then is because it was so close to the end of the war, a lot of stuff that they used on set was real. But then looking back at it now, they're like, oh, we're just going to take these World War II planes and actually blow them up. And like looking back nowadays, I'm like, no, like.
How about, okay, so how about that opening scene with that plane coming in the land and it like crash lands? Okay. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, people in the comments. I keep forgetting that there's people watching this. I believe that was the most expensive, how would you call it? Like that was the most expensive what?
Stunt.
Thank you. Okay. Talking is hard, by the way. It
is
right.
hard.
It was the most expensive movie stunt until like I want to say like the early 90s. Like there was a legit pilot that had to crash a B-17 on a real film set and he had just obviously had one take, one chance to get it right, and he nailed it. So, but yeah, no, the other movie that I think about is Tora Tora Tora.
That's my favorite.
Like they're just blowing up these planes, and you're like just shedding a tear.
I know nowadays. Back then, there was a bunch of them, so they're like, who cares?
Yeah. And then
nowadays we're like, no.
And then you have to be reminded. You're like, wait, I'm not getting emotional because there's like people dying. I'm getting emotional because planes are crashing.
I know. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few questions. Let's see.
Yeah.
Hold on, it's good. What is your favorite B-17 story? And also, thank you for sharing all of your knowledge.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for listening to my knowledge that has been packed in here for so long. Favorite. That's a really good question. Really good question. Okay, so I'll give you since I'm so long-winded, I'll give you two answers, right? Okay. I'll give you two answers for the price of one. So I'll give you a serious one and a funny one.
Okay.
Serious one. You know, let me do the funny one first, because the serious one's kind of serious. It's sad, but okay. So the funny one is there's a book that I read. If you haven't heard of it, it's well worth reading. It's called The Wrong Stuff by Truman Smith. And he was a B-17 pilot, And he basically is telling his experiences of being a pilot in the 8th Air Force. But the whole point of the book is basically saying that World War II was fought by a bunch of really stupid 19 and 20-year-olds. Like, even though we think of them as the greatest generation, they were still 19, 20-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
So he calls himself and the men he fought with the wrong stuff. So there's a story that he tells about when they were flying over the Atlantic, because a lot of these crews, they were formed up in the States. They were assigned in a fresh B-17, and then they had to fly from the East Coast all the way to England, and they would make a stop in like Ireland or someplace halfway. And so I believe it was when they were flying from St. John's to, I think it was Cork. And he tells a story about how his navigator got really, really, really sick on the flight across the Atlantic. And of course, you can imagine if you get really sick on a plane, you're over the ocean, like there's nowhere to go, right?
Yeah.
And of course, these planes didn't have bathrooms on them. So he like panicked and said, he's like calling over the intercom, like, what do I do? What do I do? And they're like, well, I don't know. Figure something out, man. Like, like there's not much you can do.
Yeah.
And if you know the B-17 on the top part of the nose, there's like a glass dome that the navigators could use their sextant to coordinate the stars and all that. Well, he said that from his point of view, he just saw the dome just unlock, get popped out, and then go inside of the nose. And he said a couple of minutes later, like one of the other guys was complaining because essentially he used it as a toilet and then chucked it out of the B-17. And then they had to explain to the top brass when they landed why they didn't have a navigational cone on their B-17, and they got like in trouble for it. So that's my favorite. And it's just, again, it's just those little, like, the small funny stories that, like, just, I don't know, it makes it bring out to life, because I could see me and my friends at 19 years old having that same exact experience. So that was a funny one. The serious one is actually from Andy Rooney's book, My War. For those who don't know, Andy Rooney, what we know today as a fantastic journalist, he was one of the first American GI journalists to fly bombing raids with the 8th Air Force in World War II. And he tells this really horrific story about a plane that was coming back from a mission. And the pilot was calling it over the radio, frantic, because they were down 2 engines, so they were only flying on 2 engines. Their electrical system had been shot out. Their hydraulic system had been shot out. Their landing gear was damaged, and they couldn't lower it manually. They were low on gasoline. They were chucking like equipment out of the plane to make it lighter so they could make it back. And he said, our
sorry, excuse me.
Was that a sneeze? If so, God bless you.
It was a cough.
Oh.
So I swallowed
well, God bless you anyways.
Down the wrong pipe. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. So they're checking
comedy relief.
Stuff.
Yeah.
It
was a bit of comedy relief. So then he says, and worst of all is my ball turret gunner stuck inside his turret. We can't get him out. And again, like, you have to read how Andy Rooney wrote it, because it's phenomenal. But he said that the men on the base were like frantically trying to figure out, like, how do you manually get a ball turret gunner out of his turret? Because if for those who don't know, the ball turret was underneath the plane, and the only way to get a guy out of the ball turret is if you moved on these like mechanical tracks, and you put the turret upside down, and there was a hatch behind him. He had to open, and he would push himself out. Well, that turret was jammed. And so they were trying to figure out how to do it. And the pilots, again, frantically calling over, saying, like, I have to land now because I don't have any gas, and we're down to 2 engines, all this. And he said that there was a long silence over the radio, and then the chaplain gets on and asks the ball turret gunner to recite the Lord's Prayer. and he said the plane had to land, had to essentially belly land, and he was crushed to death. And so, like, I don't know, just hearing that, like, reading that story, and then also one of the documentaries I watched retold that story, and it just, like, it, to me, that, like, really shows just how, like, messed up these bomber crews, like, what their job entailed. That something like that could have happened, where a perfectly fine soldier was crushed to death under the weight of his plane because of a mechanical issue.
That
And
is
then,
so sad.
and then, like, I think too, like, about that pilot, like how, like, that poor guy, like, he had, like, after the war, he went back to being a car salesman or a lawyer. Like, he had to carry that for the rest of his life.
Yeah, the guilt with that
Right.
alone
And then,
just tear up somebody.
right. So, yeah, funny story, serious story. So,
wow.
but great question, by the way. Sorry I took so long to answer.
No, you're totally fine. We have another question. Have you ever visited the Mighty Eight Museum in Savannah?
I have not. Want to. Would love to. I'm hoping to go someday, because that would be like Six Flags to me. I would have my little gift shop backpack with my little souvenir sippy cup, walk around like a kid.
Yeah, that's gonna be next month at the World War II Museum. I'm just gonna,
Oh,
it's Disney World for me. I'm just
yeah,
like, woohoo!
yeah. I just went to the Air Force Museum over in Dayton, because it's not that far from where I live.
I was just talking about that today, and I was like, I really want to go. I
Oh,
really want to go, because I followed them on Instagram, and I'm just in awe of.
Oh, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. And then, but what's funny is that we made like a family vacation out of it. So I have I have 3 kids, all under the age of 5, and I didn't think it through that I was taking 3 kids to a plane museum. I mean, they were very well behaved, but like they were kind of like freaked out, because they were like, "Why is Dad why is Dad so sweaty?" And it's like you kids have no idea what this means to me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. That's so funny.
I was like grabbing my wife's arm, like, "Can I please buy this? Please, can I buy this? I need to buy." And she's like, "No, you don't need a bomber jacket. You don't need it." I'm like, "I absolutely need it."
Yeah, you're like, "No, I do need it." Like, there's a difference between want and need, and the need is the only one that applies to this.
It is absolutely. Yeah. I didn't get it though, so
yeah.
Next time.
Freddie Joe Farnsworth wants to know, do you think the 17 MOAs won by the 8th, their story should be told? Do you think the story should be told?
Absolutely. And like, this is the thing, like, I guess, I don't know, my frustration with Hollywood is, like, it's clear to me, I don't know about you guys, it's clear to me that they're running out of ideas for movies, because they just keep remaking movies, or doing sequels or prequels or trequels, whatever this is called.
Yeah.
And I look at stories like that, and I think, well, there's a movie right there. Like, just start going through the history archives. Tell those stories. Yeah. So absolutely.
I know, and it is Hollywood, so they want to, be entertained. Just like some things in Band of Brothers weren't factually correct. Right. Like Albert Blythe, they said he died in.
You'd think
he died, but he didn't. He had a really great career after the war. He stayed in the Army and kept going. But it's it's Hollywood and all that stuff. But I do hope they start making more of these unsung heroes and these other the incredible stories that are finally coming to light.
Well, the thing I keep pointing people to is like is the show Chernobyl, because like that in my memory, like, again, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, people in the comments. I think that's the perfect example that you can stay factually aligned with what really happened, and it still make compelling television.
Yeah, I think I just watched it not like a couple months ago. It's one of my favorite.
It's so good.
Favorite shows. It's a good show. I like Skarsgård. Yes, our
Oh,
favorite. It's one of our favorites. It's such a good TV show. But yeah, but I mean, and I'm pretty sure that even with the Albert Blythe thing and stuff like that, I think Band of Brothers was pretty accurate, you know. But Freddie Joe could probably say more on that than I can because I'm not a I'm not a professional. But so
well, neither am
mhm. So let's actually, I love asking people this question.
I. Okay.
And because it's very interesting, because some people, I feel like I know what they would say, but then a lot of the times I have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
One person in history who is no longer with us that you would love to meet.
Oh, come on.
If you want to, I'll give you a top two. I'll give you two. You can do two answers.
That's still tough.
I know. That's why I love to ask it.
God. I mean, like Jimmy Doolittle would be up there.
Mm-hmm.
Because talking about a man that accomplished a lot. Admiral Bull Halsey would be. I would love to have met that guy.
Yeah.
Of course, you have Patton.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I feel Patton would be that guy that like you would love to meet, but like after like 20 minutes, you're like, "Hey, can I get a break from this guy?
Yeah.
I need to decompress." Of course, Dick Winters. I would love to have met him. My mom met him a couple times when we used to live in Lancaster, which is not far from Hershey. He would often speak at the hospital she worked at. And of course, she said this, you know, what everyone would expect. Like, he's so humble. He's the nicest guy. It's such a tough question.
Yeah.
I would have to say, all right, you know what? I'm going to go old school.
Okay.
I would love to just have dinner and chat with Napoleon.
That's a good one, actually.
Because I mean, as I just a couple of years ago, I like did a rabbit hole deep dive on him, and I'm like, man, this guy was a savage.
Yeah.
Like, talk about a guy who accomplished a lot. Like, I think he would have a wealth of wisdom to share, and also just, I don't know, just the stories he could tell you. Yeah, that would be my pick, is Napoleon.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's actually a really good comment that I agree with on here.
What's that?
At Restoration Co., he said, World War II Medal of Honor citations read like Hollywood scripts. They are so incredible. So there you go. And I definitely agree with that. They are
right.
When I do my Medal of Honor post, I don't type out what they did. I copy and paste from what their citation says, because you can't beat that. Like,
right.
It's insane.
Right.
Yeah, but I think those things are so well written and so just capture like.
Well, like in the movie Midway, there's that scene, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, played by one of the Jonas Brothers.
It was Nick Jonas.
Yeah.
He played Bruno.
Yes, Bruno Guido. That scene where he hops in the back of the Dauntless dive bomber and like starts like guns blazing at that kamikaze bomber, like, and it rips the tail section of the plane and crashes into the ocean. Like, so many people that like don't know the real story, when they saw that, they were like, that was typical, because the guy who directed Independence Day, they were like, that's totally like an Independence Day thing. I'm like, no, that really happened.
Yeah.
Like, no way. I'm like, absolutely. Like there's actual accounts that actually happened, and then they have to it's that beautiful moment where they go to Google it. They're like, oh, no way. I mean, no. And then they like look at it, and I can see that they realize that, they were wrong. And then I just smile. Yep, that really, it really did happen.
But those moments are fantastic, though, because it gets somebody researching who's not into history about that subject, and then they find themselves going on rabbit holes, and then all of a sudden they're interested in history. So I think that's actually pretty interesting. But
yeah,
Chris from Blogging Through History has a question. He wants to know, what job would you least want to have on a B-17?
all of them.
All of them.
All of them. Okay, so the real answer is ball turret gunner would have sucked a lot, because not only is it super claustrophobic, but like the space was so cramped that those guys weren't able to wear their parachutes. They had to take their parachute off. They had to put it next to their turret. And in the unlikely event that their plane was shot down, they had between 30 and 40 seconds to manually put their turret upside down, push their hatch open, push themselves out of this turret in the falling plane, strap their parachute on, and jump out. Like, no, like if your plane's going down, the ball turret gunner, it was a death sentence. So I would either pick ball turret, probably be my number one. Close second would actually have to be the tail gunner, because again, super claustrophobic. You're also separated from the rest of the plane. I mean, not like the ball turret gunner, but like you're way back there. You're kind of exposed, and that was coming from the rear was like the Luftwaffe special. And you were, I mean, if you were a tail gunner, you must have felt like every gun in the Luftwaffe was pointing right at you.
Yeah.
And then again, horrific stories about the airmen, their oxygen masks, because they're exposed to temperatures like 30 degrees below zero. What happens is your saliva and your mask would freeze, and your oxygen line would get clogged, and guys were dying of asphyxiation without even like knowing it. And so all these stories about like in the middle of like a firefight against the Luftwaffe or a flak barrage, they would realize that, hey, we haven't heard from our tail gunner in a while. Let's check in, and they would find him just dead, and his oxygen mask was clogged. Like, so those are my two answers to that.
Yeah, and you have to be a ball turret. You can't be over 5'3", right?
Okay, so I assumed so. I assumed that they were like typically the shorter members of the crew. That's actually not the case. For instance, Cecil Scott, the ball turret gunner on the Memphis Belle, he was like 5'7", 5'8", like relatively like, I mean, that's tall compared to back then, but even by today's standards, like a 5'7". I'm 5'7.5", and I mean, even if I was a thin man, I still couldn't see myself getting in that thing.
Yeah.
And then Al, my veteran buddy, he told me that his ball turret gunner on his plane was actually one of the tallest members of their crew. So you would think, like, it's the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
Nothing convenient with them.
Yeah. I think when I did a Medal of Honor post for one of the tail gunners, and I'm totally blanking his name right now. But when I was looking stuff up, they were showing a picture of somebody who was 5'10" getting in the ball turret, and I'm like, how in the world do you fit in there? Like, 5'10". That's so. He was a tall, skinny man. So like, he probably just had his like knees were probably like headphones and like everything is just.
I mean,
crazy.
You're in that thing for minimum of 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, like that'd be like, imagine you trying to like you hopping in your dryer and staying in there for 4 hours. Like, okay, forget about it.
Yeah, screw this. Yeah. Chris from Blogging Through History says his wife's grandpa was a ball turret gunner. He was only 5'2" and like 100 pounds. That's
the guts on that guy. Your grandfather or your wife's grandpa was a legend.
Yeah, that's wow. That is pretty insane. So what are some good because I know I always go on these rabbit holes after these interviews, because depending on what somebody's niche is, I get super intrigued.
Yeah.
So what documentaries do you recommend on the 8th Air Force or the Air Force in general?
Okay. I would say if you're starting with zero knowledge at all, the best documentary I've ever seen is actually a bonus episode of the television show that History Channel did called World War II in HD.
Yes.
I believe you can. I don't know if you can rent it still on Apple TV. I know you can rent it from other places, but yeah, if you just search World War II HD colon the Air War, it pops up. It's narrated by Rob Lowe, Sean Astin, the dude who played Frodo.
It's on Netflix, I'm pretty sure.
Is it?
I think it's on Netflix or it's on HBO. It's on one of my 15 streaming services. Okay. But I think it's on. I feel like it's on Netflix or HBO Max. But
okay,
yeah, I think it's on Netflix too, Chris. Yeah, I think it's on Netflix right now because I swear to God, I just recently watched it.
Well, how
on Netflix? Yeah.
How about that? Yeah. So that would, if you have zero knowledge, it's a great place to start. Fantastic documentary. But if you have a little bit of knowledge, then I would say the documentary on HBO, it's called The Cold Blue. Probably one of the best documentaries on the 8th Air Force I've ever seen. What they did was, have you ever seen the documentary They Shall Not Grow Old?
Yes.
It's kind of done like that.
Really?
They took all of the footage that William Wyler took when he was making the documentary about the Memphis Belle, and they put it through, like, they turn it into like, they took all the footage and they made it 4K.
Yeah.
And they have veterans doing telling their stories, so you see these amazing video shots of these B-17s flying in these formations, while also hearing the voices of the veterans telling their stories behind it. And it's such a good, it's good at giving the information. It's good at storytelling. It's good cinematography. I mean, some of these shots, you would swear that, like, let's say the oldest, like, you'd be seeing these shots thinking that they shot this in, like, the 90s.
Yeah.
Like, so it's so cool. Yeah, so World War II in HD, the Air War, and then the Cold Blue on HBO.
The Cold Blue. I'm definitely gonna have to watch that. Yeah, They Shall Not Grow Old was so good, and it was such a brand new, like, different concept of documentary. Wasn't it Peter Jackson who did it?
Yeah,
Peter Jackson. That I saw that in IMAX, and I was just like, it was so weird seeing this old footage, like, from World War I. It's just insane. I'm excited now to watch. What was it? Cold Blue.
The Cold Blue. Yeah.
The Cold Blue. Yeah. So I'm excited to watch that. That is super exciting.
Yeah, it's really good.
Are you looking forward to Masters of the Air? Chris wants to know.
Very. I'm curious as to how they're going to tell the story, because if you read the book, first of all, the book's enormous. You can definitely use it to protect yourself in a home invasion. You could use it as a weapon. And it tells a very, like, broad story of the 8th Air Force in Europe. I believe I would assume they're going to follow the story of Rosie in the 100th Bombardment Group, because he's kind of like the center person that they focus on throughout the whole book. But I'll be curious to see how they tell the story.
Yeah.
It's not like Band of Brothers where it's focused in on a very specific time in World War II. It's a very broad book. So, yeah, I'll be curious.
Yeah, and I think they set a release date for November, didn't they? Like October or November?
Something like that.
I believe. I feel like they announced that.
Yeah, I don't know. But anytime I can see B-17s on the big screen, I'm pretty excited for it.
I know, that's the only because they're releasing it on Apple TV, and I'm not subscribed to that, so it's gonna be the one thing I'm like, all right, I'm gonna subscribe to this Binge Masters of the Air and then cancel Apple TV.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody that the other day. They're like, oh no, I don't have Apple TV. I go, you sign up for the 7-day free trial, you binge Masters of the Air, and then you cancel that free trial before you get charged.
And then if you want to watch it again, create a fake email, get another free subscription.
I know, do it again.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Wow, Seth, this hour went by super fast.
Yeah, it did.
This was super great. Thank you so much for coming on. I was so happy that you said yes to come on. I know we talked about this a few months back, and then I was like, we can't do it till July, and then all of a sudden, poof, July's here.
Yeah.
Just,
I say, are you kidding me? I'm so honored and pleased to be on here. Like, I
oh,
thank you so much for having me on. I really
yeah,
appreciate
of course. I love your podcast. I love all the content you create, and you telling stories about the 8th Air Force, and I know everybody else loves it too. Um, so I will. So where can everybody find you? Where can they find SNAFU Podcast? Where can they find all of your social media stuff?
Well, so the easiest, I mean, we're SNAFU Podcast is on just about every podcast platform you could think of. But I would say if you want one place that has all the answers to your questions, go to snafupod.net. It has our link to our Facebook page, our Instagram page. I think our Twitter page is on there. And then it has the links to where to listen to the podcast. It's also got some really cool links and like background info. Also, on our website right now, you can, if you go to information and links at the very bottom, there's 2 links that you could take a virtual tour of 2 real B-17s.
Oh, that's cool.
Really, yeah. So that's on there. And then also, if you want to get more out of the podcast, you want to dive deeper into it and get a better experience, you can visit us on our Patreon page, and there's all kinds of cool things on there. Like I do computer-generated pictures of all the characters, so you get to see what they look like. And then I also like wrote all their information, like an actual like military file, like their background, their height, all that stuff. So, yeah.
Wonderful. I will also link it after this is wrapped up. This will also be available on YouTube tomorrow, and also, well, I'll probably upload it tonight and rewatch on Instagram as well. I want to thank everybody for asking questions and tuning into the live. I greatly appreciate it. And Seth, again, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. And it was super great. So
thank you for having me on.
Yeah. All right. Well, you have a great night. Okay.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.